Okay, so you know how we all want to get better at understanding English, like when we're listening to it?
Uh-huh.
It feels like some people just pick it up, like it's easy.
Great.
We're doing a deep dive today looking at articles and like actual guides and stuff about how to improve English listening skills,
Cool.
especially for busy people.
Yeah, I'm all ears. That's me for sure.
Me too, actually.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that really surprised me was how many of these articles and guides are all about like having fun.
Fun.
Yeah, like actually enjoying it.
Hmm.
But does that really work?
Oh, it totally does. And it's not just, to make it more fun. Like, there's actually science behind it.
Really?
Yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
When you're doing something you enjoy, you pay way more attention.
That's true.
You're more engaged, and you're more likely to keep doing it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But I have to say, I'm a little skeptical about some of these tips. Like, they seem almost too simple.
Okay, like what?
Okay, so there's this article. It's called 5 Tips for Busy Learners. And it suggests just having English, like playing in the background,
Yeah.
while you're doing other stuff, like chores and things. Does that actually do anything?
You'd be surprised. I mean, it may seem passive, but our brains are really good at picking up on patterns, even when we're not like totally focused on it. Think about how you learned your first language. I mean, you were just surrounded by it constantly,
Yeah.
soaking up all the sounds, way before you could even talk. And we can actually kind of do that as adults too.
So you're saying it's like slowly, I don't know, like rewiring our brains to be able to understand English better?
Exactly.
Okay, I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
And another thing that kept coming up was this idea of listening to things you actually enjoy,
Oh, for sure.
which is, I mean, that's not so bad, right?
No, not at all.
So there's this blog, the Promova blog, and they specifically recommend shows like Friends and Sherlock.
Oh, nice.
I mean, those would be fun to watch for a study session.
Right. And you know what else is important? Picking content with different accents.
Oh, right.
Like British, American, Australian even.
Because it's not like we need to learn how to speak with every accent out there, right?
Right.
But just getting used to how words sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So your ear can pick out the important words even if they're pronounced a bit differently.
Yeah, like sometimes I'm watching some British show and I'm like, wait, what did they just say? And then like a second later, I realize, oh, that's just how they say it.
Totally. And that process of figuring it out is what helps your brain become like more flexible with the language.
Like adaptable.
Right. Like building muscle memory, but for your ears.
Okay, so I'm getting it, I think. But what about something a bit more, I don't know, active?
Active.
Yeah, because so far it's mostly like just having English on in the background.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, this technique called shadowing caught my eye.
Shadowing.
The Promova blog explained it as listening to like a short sentence, and then you pause it. And then you try to say the sentence out loud, like copying the way they said it.
Oh, interesting.
You've ever tried that?
I have. It can be kind of weird at first,
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it really makes you pay attention to like all the little details, how they say things, rhythm and intonation. It's like active listening in its purest form.
That makes sense. I could see how that would be helpful, especially if you're trying to get better at pronouncing words correctly yourself.
For sure.
It's like you're learning by copying, almost like an actor would do for a role.
Exactly. And, that active engagement is what makes listening practice so effective. And a lot of these resources also suggest taking notes while you listen.
Oh, interesting.
Or even, trying to sum up what you just heard. It's all about getting your brain more involved, not just letting the sounds wash over you.
Right, so it's not enough to just have it playing in the background. We're actually like actively engage with it.
Right.
But I have to admit, sometimes I get so caught up in trying to understand every single word that I completely miss the point.
Tell me about it.
It can be so frustrating, especially with movies that are like really fast-paced.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Well, the Cambridge Guide actually had a great tip for this.
Okay, what is it?
They said to try and focus on understanding the gist of what you're hearing, especially in like exam situations where there's not a lot of time.
The gist.
Yeah, like the main idea. They said not to worry too much about individual words you miss, but to concentrate on getting the big picture, and use context to fill in any gaps.
It's like you're putting together a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
You find the clues and figure out what the whole picture looks like.
That's a great way to think about it.
I like that. But, okay, so how do we actually do this?
Mm,
Like in real life?
right.
Because, we're all busy.
Oh, absolutely.
finding even 15 minutes can feel impossible some days.
Well, that's where a little planning comes in handy. The Cambridge Guide actually recommends timetabling regular practice, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
Okay.
And that actually goes really well with the listen everywhere idea we were talking about.
You mean like not having to find a big chunk of time,
Exactly.
just fitting it in throughout the day.
Right, like listen on your commute
Oh, yeah.
or while you're making dinner,
Hmm.
little bits here and there.
It's like a little English treasure hunt throughout the day.
I love that. And, don't underestimate that passive listening.
Passive listening.
Yeah. 5 Tips for Busy Learners talks about this too.
Okay.
But even having English radio or TV on in the background, even if you're not fully paying attention.
Wait, so even if I'm like half listening
Yeah.
while I'm working or whatever, it's still helpful.
It is. It's like, imagine soaking a sponge in water.
Yeah.
Even if you don't squeeze it, it's still absorbing the liquid, right? Same with your brain. You're creating this immersive environment where your brain is constantly taking in those English sounds.
Okay, this is starting to make sense now.
Mm-hmm.
So all these little tips actually work together.
They do.
Cool. But let's say I'm ready to move beyond that background noise, like actually really dive into listening.
Gotcha.
The Promova blog, they talk a lot about, setting realistic goals
Yeah.
and choosing the right materials. So how do you actually get started with that?
Well, the most important thing is to start with material that's the right level for you.
Okay.
Jumping into something too hard will just be frustrating.
True.
Luckily, there are lots of resources out there with placement tests.
Placement tests?
Yeah, and content for different levels. A lot of language learning apps even have them built in.
Like Promova?
Like Promova, yeah.
Oh, okay.
They can help you figure out where you're at.
So it's not like you're just guessing.
Exactly.
You can actually know what your strengths and weaknesses are.
Right. And once you know your level, then you can find resources specifically for that stage.
I see. So, for example, if I'm a beginner, what kind of stuff should I be listening to?
Well, Promova suggests starting with things like children's shows.
Oh, just
Or movies like, Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo. Yeah, I love that
They
movie.
do.
But isn't that a little, I don't know.
Simple.
Yeah.
Well, the language is simple, the pace is slower, and honestly, they're fun to watch no matter how old you are.
Okay, true.
Ooh.
It's guilt-free entertainment.
Exactly. You're learning without even realizing it.
But what about when I'm ready to move on from Finding Nemo?
Then you can gradually make things more challenging.
Okay.
Promova recommends sitcoms next, like Friends or Alf.
Oh, classics.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone knows at least a few phrases from Friends.
Probably. And then, when you're feeling really confident, you can try dramas, documentaries, even podcasts on specific topics.
Wow, so many options.
It's like a buffet of English listening.
And the key is to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
Like challenge yourself.
Right. But not overwhelm yourself.
Yeah.
Find that sweet spot where you're engaged and learning, but you're not totally lost.
Speaking of feeling lost, I remember reading in the Cambridge Guide that it's important to not get hung up on every single word.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Like they said, to focus on the overall meaning
Uh-huh.
instead of trying to understand every little thing.
Exactly. Because, in real conversations, context is so important.
Context.
Yeah, you can often figure out what a word means even if you don't know it, just from the other words around it.
Oh, like when you're reading a book and you come across a word you don't know.
Right.
You don't stop and look it up. You just keep reading.
Uh-huh.
And usually you can figure it out.
Exactly. And it's the same with listening. Those clues are all around you.
The more you practice, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, finding the right level of materials and focusing on the overall meaning instead of getting stuck on individual words. What about note-taking?
Note-taking.
I remember a few of the sources mentioned that.
Oh, yeah. That's a great technique. It really helps you actively engage with what you're listening to.
So, write down keywords.
Yeah, keywords, phrases, even just bullet points. Anything that helps you remember.
I've always been a big note-taker, but I never thought to do it for listening practice.
Well, try it. You might be surprised how much it helps.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're creating this mental map of the information.
Exactly.
And you can always go back and review it later.
Right. Especially if you're preparing for an English exam, note-taking is super useful.
Oh, true. Because a lot of those exams have listening sections.
Yeah, where you have to listen and take notes.
So it's a skill that's good for, real life and exam.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Okay, so one more thing I want to make sure we cover. Finding conversation partners.
Ah, yes. Getting out there and actually speaking with people.
Right. Because, it's one thing to listen to recordings and watch movies,
Right.
but actually talking is a whole different ballgame.
Totally. And luckily, there are so many ways to find conversation partners these days.
Like online?
The Promova blog talks about apps like Tandem and Hello Talk.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
You can connect with people all over the world.
Okay.
People who are also learning English, or even native speakers who want to learn your language.
It's like a language exchange party.
It is, and it's such a great way to put those listening skills into practice.
Like in a real setting.
You'll
Yeah.
pick up on idioms, slang, all those little things you might not hear in textbooks.
It's like the difference between reading about a culture and actually experiencing it.
Exactly. It brings the language to life.
Okay, so conversation partners are a good idea. But, it can be a little scary.
Scary.
Yeah, like putting yourself out there,
Oh, I know what you mean.
especially if you're not feeling very confident.
Well, remember, everyone starts somewhere. And the Promova blog really emphasizes embracing those mistakes.
The spakes.
Yeah, like it's part of the process. Even native speakers make mistakes.
Oh, true.
The important thing is to be willing to try, to experiment, and to learn from those mistakes.
It's not about being perfect.
Exactly. It's about progress, not perfection.
That's a good way to put it. And when you think about it like that, it's a lot less intimidating.
Exactly.
All right, so we're back. We've talked about a lot of different stuff, like, fitting English into your day and actually talking to people. But how do we actually make this happen?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? I think it comes down to finding a way to make it enjoyable.
Enjoyable.
Remember how we were talking about having fun?
Uh-huh.
Well, it really does make a difference. When you're enjoying something, you learn better and you're more likely to stick with it.
Okay, so fun is important. But how do we actually make English listening fun? Like, any ideas?
Well, think about what you already enjoy doing. In your own language, I mean. Do you like listening to podcasts, watching funny shows, singing in the shower?
I mean, yeah.
You can do all of that in English.
So it's like finding the English version of things I already like.
Exactly. So if you're into history, find a podcast about history in English. If you love reality TV, well, there's a whole world of English reality shows out there.
That's a good point. And it doesn't have to be a big commitment.
No, not at all.
Even listening to one English song a day or watching a short YouTube video, that can make a difference.
Oh yeah, for sure. Little things done consistently can really add up.
But even with the best intentions, it's easy to get off track. Life gets in the way. You get busy. How do you stay motivated?
Well, the Cambridge Guide had an interesting suggestion. They said to talk to yourself.
Wait, what?
Talk to yourself in English.
Really? Like, have conversations with myself?
Not full-on conversations, but like think out loud in English.
Yeah.
Describe what you're doing, practice phrases you've learned.
That's kind of interesting.
It might feel weird at first, but it's a great way to get comfortable with the sounds of English. And you can do it anywhere, anytime.
I do like the idea of having a conversation partner who's always available.
Right. And no judgment.
But what if I want to, get feedback on my speaking?
Oh, good point.
We talked about conversation partners, but is there anything else, like something a little less intimidating?
5 tips for busy learners. They suggest recording yourself speaking.
Recording myself.
Yeah. And then listen back to it. It can help you notice things about your pronunciation, your fluency.
That's actually a really good idea.
It is. You might be surprised at how much you've improved.
It's like having a language coach in your pocket. And then you can track your progress.
Exactly. And those small improvements, they really boost your confidence.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
A question.
Yeah. It's inspired by the Cambridge Guide. What's one small thing you can do this week to improve your English listening?
Yeah, what's one little step you can take?
It could be setting aside 15 minutes to listen to a podcast.
Or watching a show with subtitles.
Or even just talking to yourself in English for 5 minutes.
The key is to make it a habit. Those little things, done consistently, can lead to big results.
So to all our listeners out there, go out and explore the world of English listening.
Have fun with it.
And remember, every little bit counts. Keep practicing, keep learning, and you'll get there.
You got this.